smo protiv ugnjetača i njihovih pomagača, legionara i fašista, aj Karmela, aj Karmela. Legionara i fašista, aj Karmela, aj Karmela. Je samo jedna, da fašista više nema. Mi nemamo avione, tenkove i kamione, aj Karmela. Neko je na municije, gladan je te polje prije, aj Karmela. Ne mogu da bome ništa, ni oluja, ni
To the superficial observer, the analogies of these forms turn upon minutiae. Does in fact deal with minutiae, but they are the same order as those dealt with in microscopic anatomy. With the exception of the section on value form, therefore, this volume cannot stand accused on the score of difficulty. I presuppose, of course, a reader who is willing to learn something new, and therefore to think for himself. No, todavía lo quiero. The physicist either observes physical phenomena where they occur in their most typical form and most free from disturbing influence, or, whether possible, he makes experiments under conditions that assure the occurrence of the phenomenon in its normality. In this work, I have to examine the capitalist mode of production and the conditions of production and exchange corresponding to that mode. Up to the present time, their classic ground is England. That is the reason why England is used as the chief illustration in the development of my theoretical ideas. If, however, the German reader shrugs his shoulders at the condition of the English, industrial and agricultural laborers, or in optimist fashion converts himself to the thought that in Germany they are not nearly so bad, I must plainly tell him, de te fabula nadatur. Intrinsically, it is not a question of the higher or lower degree of development of the social antagonisms that result from the nature or laws of capitalist production. It is a great question of these laws themselves, of these tendencies working with iron necessity towards inevitable results. The country that is more developed industrially only shows to the less developed the image of its own future. But apart from this, where capitalist production is fully naturalized by among the Germans, for instance in the factories proper, the condition of things is much more worse than in England, because the counterpoise of the factory acts is wanting. In all other spheres, we, like all the rest of continental Western Europe, suffer not only from the development of the capitalist production, but also from the incompleteness of that development. Alongside of modern evils, a whole series of inherited evils oppress us, arising with their inevitable train of social and political anachronisms. We suffer not only from the living, but from the dead. Le mort s'assite le vil. Le fil. Le vif. Le mort s'assite le vif. The social statistics of Germany and the rest of continental Western Europe are, in comparison with those of England, wretchedly compiled. But they raise the veil just enough to let us catch a glimpse of the Medusa head behind it. We should be appalled at the state of things at home, if, as in England, our governments and parliaments appointed periodically commissions of inquiry into economic conditions. If these commissions were armed with the same plenary powers to get at the truth, if it was possible to find for this purpose men as competent, as free from partisanship and respect persons as are the English factory inspectors, her medical reporters on public health, her commissions of inquiry into the exploitation of women and children, into housing and food, Perseus wore a magic cap that the monsters be hunted down might not see him. We draw the magic cap down over our eyes and ears as make-believe that there are no monsters. Let us not deceive ourselves on this. As in the 18th century, the American War of Independence sounded the tocsin for the European middle class, so in the 19th century, the American Civil War sounded it for the European working class. In England, the progress of social disintegration is palpable. When it has reached a certain point, it must be reacted on the continent. There it will take a form more brutal or more humane according to the degree of development of the working class itself. Apart from higher motives, therefore, their most important interests dictate to the classes that are for the moments of the ruling ones the removal of all legally removable hindrances to the free development of the working class. For this development, as others, I have given so large space in this volume of the history, the details, and the results of English factory legislation. One nation can and should learn from others. And even when a society has got upon the right track for a discovery of the natural laws of its movement, and it is the ultimate aim of this work to lay bare the economic law of motion in modern society, it can neither clear by bold leaps nor remove by illegal enactments the obstacles offered by the successive phases of its normal development, but it can shorten and lessen the birth pangs. To prevent possible misunderstanding, a word. I paint the capitalist and the landlord in no sense couleur de rose, but here individuals are dealt with only insofar as they are the personifications of economic categories, embodiments of particular class relations and class interests. My standpoint, from which the evolution of the economic formation of society is viewed as a process of natural history, can less than any other make the individual responsible for relations whose creature he solely remains, however much he may subjectively raise himself above them. In the domain of political economy, free scientific inquiry meets not merely the same enemies as in all other domains. The peculiar nature of the material it deals with summons its foes into the field of battle, the most violent, mean, and malignant passions of the human breast, the theories of private interests. The English established church will more readily pardon an attack on 38 of its 39 articles than on 139th of its income. Nowadays, atheism itself is culpa levis, as compared with criticism of existing property relations. Nevertheless, there is an unmistakable advantage. I refer, e.g., to the Blue Book published within the last few weeks, correspondence with Her Majesty's missions abroad regarding industrial questions and trade unions. The representatives of the English Crown in foreign countries have declared in so many words that in Germany and France, to be brief, in all the civilized states of the European continent, a radical change in the existing relations between capital and labor is inevitable as in England. At the same time, on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, Mr. Wade, Vice President of the United States, declared in public meetings that after the abolition of slavery, a radical change of the relation of capital and property and land is next upon the order of the day. These are signs of the times, not to be hidden by purple mantles or black cassocks. They do not signify that tomorrow a miracle will happen. They show that within the ruling classes themselves, a foreboding is drawing, that the present society is no solid crystal, but an organism capable of change and is constantly changing. The second volume of this work will treat the process of the circulation of capital, Book 2, and of the varied forms asserted by capital in the course of its development, Book 3. Every opinion based on scientific criticism I welcome. As to the prejudices of so-called public opinion, to which I have never made concessions, now as aforetime, the maxim of the great Florentine is mine. Segui il tuo corso, e lascia diligenti. London, July 25, 1867, Karl Marx. So this is from Karl Marx, Capital, an abridged but critical analysis of capitalist production, edited by Frederick Engels. So today is June 11th, 2026. Current conflicts include the U.S.-Israel war in Iran, as well as the European Union, NATO, war in Ukraine against Russia and the Soviet Union. So the situation in our day is as dire as the day of Marx. Marx, instead of experiencing the war in Ukraine experienced the war in the American Civil War. The American Civil War, which was a conflict based on capital, based on where the U.S. would have to continually rely on the slave labor of millions of slaves from West Africa, and or would it be a self-sufficient country. After the Civil War and the assassination of President Lincoln, it was proved the United States could not be a self-sufficient country and would need to plunder the rest of the world to make ends meet. This goes to show the failure of capitalism and the failure of Reconstruction. All wars that are righteous must be followed up with reforms that give land back to the people and not the few. In Colombia today, 70% of the population of the countryside is owned by 3% of the population. The workers are given a few pesos a day just to buy a few necessities of a couple of burritos a day, and are given basically just enough to be above starvation level, barely subsistence level, while the wealthy go to art museums and swimming pools. The war in eastern Ukraine today is based off of a conflict where most of the Ukrainian population wants to join NATO, wants to join the European Union to get well-paying jobs in England, Germany, Belgium, and France, instead of toiling in industrial manufacturing that builds products such as tractors that are used to feed the world. So it's more of a conflict of interest between the poor people of the world and those who seek to become a global part of the global elite or part of the imperial core. Anyway, thank you for listening. And this is Benjamin Ettinger, and I will be posting more of these videos here on YouTube. Feel free to like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If then we leave out of consideration the use value of commodities, they have only one common property left, that is, being the products of labor. But even if the product of labor itself has undergone a change in our hands, if we make abstractions about its use value, we make abstraction at the same time from the material elements and shapes that make the product the use value. We see in it no longer a table, a house, yarn, or any other useful thing. Its existence as a material thing is put out of sight. It can no longer be regarded as the product of the labor of the joiner, the mason, the spinner, or any other definite kind of productive labor. Along with the useful qualities of the products themselves, we put out of sight both the useful character of the various kinds of labor embodied in them and the concrete forms of that kinds of labor. Of that labor, there is nothing left by what is common to them all. All are reduced to one and the same of labor, human labor in the abstract. Let us now consider the residue of each of these products. It consists of the same unsubstantial reality in each, a mere congregation of homogeneous human labor, of labor power expanded without regard to the mode of expenditure. All that these things tell us now that human labor has been expended into production, that human labor is embodied in them. When looked at as crystals of the social substance common to them, they are values. We have seen that when commodities are exchanged, their exchange value manifests itself as something totally independent of their use value. But if we extract from their use value, there remains their value as defined above. Therefore, the common substance that manifests itself in the exchange value of commodities, whenever they are exchanged, is their value. The progress of our investigation will show that exchange value is the only form in which the value of commodities can manifest itself or be expressed. For the present, however, we have to consider the nature of value independently of all of this its form. A use value or useful article, therefore, has value only because human labor in the abstract is embodied or materialized in it. How then is the magnitude of this value to be measured? Plainly by the quantity of the value-creating substance, the labor contained in the article. The quantity of labor, however, is measured by its duration. And labor time in its turn finds a standard in weeks, days, and hours. Some people might think that if the value of a commodity is determined by the quantity of labor spent on it, the more idle and unskillful the laborer, the more valuable would the commodity be, because more time would be required in its production. The labor, however, that forms the substance of value is homogeneous human labor in the expenditure of one uniform labor power. The total labor power of society, which is embodied in the sum total of the value of all commodities produced by that society, counts here as one homogeneous mass of human labor power, composed, though it be of innumerable individual units. Each of these units is the same as any other, so far as it has the character of the average labor power of society, and takes effect as such. That is, so far as it requires for producing a commodity no more time than is needed on average, no more than is socially necessary. The labor time socially necessary that is required to produce an article in normal conditions of production, and with the average degree of skill and intensity prevalation of that time. The introduction of power looms into England probably reduced by 1 hour, by one half the labor required to weave a given quantity of yarn and cloth. The hand loom weavers, as a matter of fact, continued to require the same time as before, but for the product of 1 hour of their labor represented after the change only half an hour of social labor, and consequently fell to one half its former value. We see then that which determines the magnitude of the value of an article is the amount of labor socially necessary, or the labor time socially necessary for its production. Each individual commodity in its connection is to be considered as an average sample of its class. Commodities, therefore, in which equal quantities of labor are embodied, or which can be produced in the same time, have the same value. The value of one commodity is to the value of any other as the labor time necessary for the production of the one is to that necessary for the production of the other. As values, all commodities are only definite masses of congealed labor time. The value of a commodity would therefore remain constant if the labor time required for its production also remained constant. But the latter changes with every variation in the productiveness of labor. This productiveness is determined by various circumstances, among others, by the average amount of skill of the workman, the state of science, and the degree of its practical application, the social organization of production, the extent and capabilities of the means of production, and by physical conditions. For example, the same amount of labor in favorable seasons is embodied in 8 bushels of corn, and in unfavorable only in 4. The same labor extracts from rich mines more metal than from poor mines. Diamonds are a very rare occurrence on the Earth's surface, and hence their discovery costs, on average, a great deal of labor time. Consequently, much labor is represented in a small compass. Jacob doubts whether gold has ever been paid for in its full value. This applies still more to diamonds. According to Estuage, the total produce of the Brazilian diamond mines for the 80 years ending in 1823 had not realized the price of 1.5 years average produce of the sugar and coffee plantations of the same country. Although diamonds cost much more labor and therefore represented more value. With richer mines, the same quantity of labor would embody itself in more diamonds, and their value would fall. If we could succeed at a small expenditure of labor in converting carbon into diamonds, their value might fall below that of bricks. In general, the greater the productiveness of labor, the less is the labor time required for the production of an article. The less is the amount of labor crystallized in that article, and the less is its value, and vice versa. The less productiveness of labor, the greater is the labor time required for the production of an article, and the greater is its value. The value of a commodity, therefore, varies directly as the quantity and inversely as the productiveness of the labor incorporated in it. A thing can be of use value without having value. This is the case whenever its utility to man is not due to labor, such as our air, virgin soil, natural metals, etc. A thing can be useful and the product of human labor without being a commodity. Whoever directly satisfies his wants with the products of his own labor creates indeed use values, but not commodities. In order to produce the latter, he must not only produce use values, but use values for others, social use values, and not only for others, without more. The medieval peasant produced quit rent corn for his feudal lord and tithe corn for his parson. But neither the quit rent corn or the tithe corn become commodities by reason of the fact that they had produced for others. They had to be produced for others. To become a commodity, a product must be transferred to another, whom it will serve as use value by means of an exchange. Lastly, nothing can have value without being an object of utility. If the thing is useless, so is the labor contained in it. The labor does not count as labor, and therefore creates no value. This is Karl Marx on commodities in the book Kapital, Unabridged, a critical analysis of capitalist production, edited by Frederick Engels. Now for some commentary.
We're going to go over to Telegram and read some headlines briefly.
New explosions heard in Sirik, southern Iran. Some say it's possibly related to the launch of anti-ship missiles or drones toward the Strait of Hormuz. The situation in the Strait of Hormuz is more insecure due to U.S. actions. So far, Iran has not reached a final conclusion about an agreement. The matters raised about an agreement are only speculation and nothing has been finalized. President Trump. The agreement will likely be signed in the weekend somewhere in Europe and J.D. Vance will be in attendance.
And it's probably bullshit. He's trying to rig the market on commodities and oil.
A message from an Iranian soldier stationed on one of Iran's islands in the Persian Gulf. Tell the Iranian people that we have come here to die. If the American enemy sets foot on this pure island, we will fight with everything we have. Politics and negotiation are not important to us. We know only one thing, and that is sacrifice. Sacrifice for Iran and the Iranian people. The conditions here are a little difficult, especially now that temperatures have gone up, and at night we are lonely and away from our families, and these bombs that are eating away at us. But we still remember the scene of the martyrdom of thousands of our compatriots. We will protect this land with tooth and nail. We will sacrifice our lives to you. Credit to Iranian militarism, according to Middle East Spectator. New. Before Trump called off the strikes against Iran, he was contacted by the Pakistanis, who claimed they struck a deal with Iran. New York Times. Fars News Agency. No text for an additional memorandum of understanding with the U.S. has been approved, according to an informed source close to the Islamic Republic of Iran's negotiating team. Okay, continuing. Section 2. The twofold character of the labor embodied in commodities. At first sight, a commodity presented itself to use as a complex of two things, use value and exchange value. Later on, we saw also that labor too possesses the same twofold nature. For so far as it finds expression in value, it does not possess the same characteristics that belong to it as a creator of its use values. I was the first to point out and to examine critically this twofold nature of the labor contained in its commodities. As this point is the pivot on which a clear comprehension of political economy turns, we must go into more detail. Let us take two commodities such as a coat and 10 yards of linen, and let the former be double the value of the latter, so that if 10 yards of linen equals W, the coat equals 2W. The coat is a use value that satisfies a particular want. Its existence is the result of a special sort of productive activity, the nature of which is determined by its aim, mode of operations, subject, means and result. The labor whose utility is thus represented by the value and use of its products, or which manifests itself by making the product a use value, we call useful labor. This connection we consider only as useful effect. As the coat and the linen are two qualitatively different use values, so also are the two forms of labor that produce them, tailoring and weaving. Where these two objects, not qualitatively different, not produced respectively by labor of different quality, they could not stand to each other in the relationship of commodities. Coats are not exchanged for coats. One use value is not exchanged for another in the same kind. To all the different varieties of values in use, there correspond as many different kinds of useful labor, classified according to the order, genus, species, and variety to which they belong in the social division of labor. The division of labor is a necessary condition for the production of commodities, but it does not follow conversely that the production of commodities is a necessary condition for the division of labor. In the primitive Indian community, there is social division of labor without production of commodities. Or to take an example near home, in every factory the labor is divided according to a system, but in every factory, but the division is not brought about by the operatives mutually exchanging their individual products. Only such products can become commodities with regard to each other as a result from different kinds of labor, each kind being carried out independently and to the account of private individuals. To resume then, in the use value of each commodity there is contained useful labor, i.e. productive activity of a definite kind and exercise with a definite aim. Use value cannot confront each other as commodities unless the useful labor embodied in them is qualitatively different in each of them. In a community, the produce of which in general takes the form of commodities, in a community of commodity producers, this qualitative difference between the useful forms of labor that are carried on independently by individual producers, such as on their own account, develops into a complex system, a social division of labor. So what Karl Marx is describing is that the divisions of labor are not always clear-cut, as in an industrialized society. But even industrialized society could have some ununiform patterns in how labor is structured. So he went over India and the loom industry there. So he discussed how a mechanized loom unit or linen unit could produce cloth in half the time as an unmechanized loom unit, and that both could be working at the same time and have the same amount of labor, but they're only one produces less quantity of product as the other. Okay. This is Benjamin Ettinger reading Karl Marx, Kapital Unabridged, a critical analysis of capital production, and we are in chapter 1, and we are on page. We are. Hold on a second. We are on chapter 1, page 48. We've been over page 48, where we've discussed commodities. So we discussed here the equivalent form of value. The commodity A, linen, is expressing its value in the same use values of a commodity differing in kind at the time impressed upon the latter a specific form of value, namely that of the equivalent. So here in the footnotes is Mr. Broadhurst might just as well said, consider the fractions 10 over 20, 10 over 50, 10 over 100. So he's talking about most likely, or from what I understand, the price of linen could be higher if produced by hand or unmechanized, like a wooden loom, compared to an industrial loom that could produce linen or a mechanized loom that could produce linen in 10/50ths of the time, or 10/100ths of the time, or 10/20ths of the time. So I left off there at page 50. So here we'll keep reading. For instance, 40 yards of linen are worth what? 2 coats? Because the commodity coat here plays the part of equivalent. Because the use value coat, as opposed to the linen, figures as an embodiment of value. Therefore, a definite number of coats suffices to express the definite quality of values to the linen. 2 coats may be therefore express the same quantity of value of 40 yards of linen, but they can never express the quantity of their own value. A superficial observation of this fact, namely that in the equation of value, the equivalent figures exclusively as a simple quantity of some article of some use value, as Missel Bailey, as also many others, both before and after him, into seeing in the expression of value merely a quantitative relation. The truth being that when a commodity acts as equivalent, no quantitative determination of its value is expressed. Okay, thank you for listening. This is Benjamin Ettinger. Today is June 11, 2026. As I said before, there are 2 wars going on. The war in the Middle East between Iran and its allies and Israel and the United States, and the war between Russia, the Soviet Union, and the fascist puppet state in Kiev. So here we are. We are living in a world which is enduring massive conflicts, and yet we're here able to enjoy some literature printed in the year printed in the year printed the 7th printing printed in 1975, a time when socialism was on the rise across the world in the 70s during the Brezhnev era of the Soviet Union. But the original document was in 1867. So in the 1970s, the Soviet Union was able to send military equipment to places like Vietnam and Mozambique and Zimbabwe to help them fight off the colonizing forces that had been plundering them for about 200 to 400 years. exploiting their populations, taking people into slavery, taking gold and diamonds, and leaving nothing but waste and deforestation, leaving people in starvation. This is what Western Europe left behind in Africa, Latin America, and Asia.
Tienes que cerrar la puerta cuando vas al baño.
And then Western Europe, now with its mountain of wealth accumulated from 400 years of exploitation, now uses its wealth to lure Eastern Europeans into joining the European Union so they could go to universities and well-paying jobs in Western Europe, like in France and Belgium, and leaving the factories of Eastern Europe to rot and rust. The socialist bloc, the factories of the socialist bloc to rot and rust. And that's what the war in Ukraine is really about. It's about imperialism versus socialism, colonialism versus community, and fascism versus equality. Okay. Alright. Anyway, feel free to like and subscribe, and be sure to ring the bell for notifications. Bye.